Harry Potter 2. What was the second? The Chamber of Secrets. Holy hell, it's late. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I always want to call them episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, kind of like a Star Wars movie, but then when I say that, people get triggered, so I stopped doing that. Chamber of Secrets. What is this movie about? Harry Potter returns to Hogwarts, and as he's in Hogwarts, he is warned constantly by a little gnome or whatever the fuck it is that there's something dangerous going on in Hogwarts right now. Harry Potter and the crew become strangely obsessed with this thing called the Chamber of Secrets. Guys, if you saw my previous review, I reviewed the first Harry Potter and I liked it quite a bit. I thought it was a fairly enjoyable movie. Do I like Chamber of Secrets as much? It's hard for me. And the way I look at Chamber of Secrets is the same way I look at Temple of Doom. The first Indiana Jones came out, everyone loved it, it was a smash hit, it was so fantastical, it was so creative, so many iconic moments, and for the sequel, Steven Spielberg decided to go extremely darker. He decided to have child slavery and these weird scenes. I remember even when I was watching that movie as a kid, there's this scene that terrified me where Indiana Jones is hearing the screams of children as he's getting tortured and stuff like that. That weird hallucination scene. It was a much darker film and people didn't connect with it as much, though I did appreciate the fact that the movie did go darker. Kind of the same thing in this movie. This is a much darker movie, though to a less extent. When you talk about the leap from Indiana Jones 1 to 2, that's a pretty big leap, versus here is pretty darker, but I do enjoy that little element of darkness that they introduce. The first Harry Potter was pretty terrifying in its own right as a child watching it, but this one was pretty, even watching it as an adult, it's pretty mature. You have someone who's going around petrifying children and petrifying animals. The fucking cat gets petrified, and he's writing in blood on the walls that the Chamber of It's a pretty darker movie in my opinion, and that's kind of what I like about this movie. This movie goes the darker route. Unfortunately, I feel like Chris Columbus, his whimsical style doesn't really fit the darker themes as much. I wish they kind of just leaned into that darkness a bit more and really became more terrifying. It kind of finds its way in the middle, that it's not as whimsical as the first movie, but not as dark as something like Temple of Doom, which I wish it did. By the way, I'm a huge fan of Temple of Doom. I love Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. But just like I talked about the Lego set in the first Harry Potter movie, how I had the girls' bathroom Lego set, I did have a toy that was associated with this movie. It was I'm trying to remember what it was. I think I had like a toy car of the flying car. I'm gonna try to find pictures of this on the internet. And I had a Whomping Willow board game. It was like a board game with a Whomping Willow, and it was kind of like this Don't Wake Up Daddy kind of thing where you're like hoping the Whomping Willow doesn't knock shit over or some shit like that. Going back to the movie, that was a weird tangent. I do appreciate that it went for a much darker tone, and all the things I like in the first Harry Potter movie are still here. The beautiful effects, like the snake at the end of this movie, is really awesome to watch. When Harry Potter stabs the snake, we actually see blood, and when the snake gets its eyes stabbed by the fucking pigeon or the phoenix, the eyes are bloody. This is a pretty bloody movie given that it's supposed to be a children's movie. Again, this is a much darker movie, and I'm trying to figure out why it kind of didn't resonate to me as much as a Temple of Doom, and I feel like it lies in the fact that it's lacking that hero journey that the first movie had. I didn't feel as connected to these three kids as I did in the first movie. There was something about it. They didn't give the characters that much to do. Hermione is side Like, they put her aside in this movie, which I actually think is a good idea. One of my favorite Marvel movies is actually Iron Man 3. And the reason why I like Iron Man 3 is because the writers were smart enough to nerf the character. They gave him this shitty Iron Man suit and said, work with what you got now. And I feel like this movie does a similar thing where they put Hermione aside. She gets petrified during the movie, and Ron's wand doesn't work for most of the movie. And I feel like that made for some interesting scenarios. But again, I just wish these characters had more to do. I wish I felt something more for Harry Potter. The first Harry Potter had that great scene where Harry Potter is talking in the mirror and seeing his parents and stuff like that, and it's a very emotional scene. A little schmaltzy, but it's Chris Columbus, he does schmaltz. I felt myself longing for that kind of emotion in this movie too. Even the first half of this movie, I would say, feels very rushed, and you're jumping from one scene to another. You're not getting to know these characters. It just feels like a couple of set pieces where, hey, look, pixies are attacking the classroom. Look, they're gardening with these weird trolls that are screaming very loud. And that's another thing too. This movie is pretty loud. Like, there's a lot of characters that are like, I'm like, oh god. Okay, one character is enough like that. Do you need like the blue pixies and the garden gnomes and all that? I get it, but whatever. I felt like the pacing was too quick. There was this scene where Harry first discovers the petrified cat, and it's like Harry sees the cat, and then the whole class, like all of his classmates arrive, and it just felt like a very fast scene where it didn't feel like... It didn't feel natural. It just felt like very fast. That's not to say I didn't like this movie. This movie is quite enjoyable. The part where Harry Potter is writing in the book and goes to the flashback and sees a young Hagrid and stuff like that, I thought all that was pretty interesting. Chris Columbus is still present in this movie. He's not phoning it in. He still has that magical awe-like wonder. Though I feel like after this movie, they replaced him with Alfonso Cuarón, and I think that was overall for the better, because you can tell that this movie, he's like basically grasping at straws at some scenes and stuff like that. Because you watch this movie and I feel like Columbus was squeezing every drop of creativity he had in it, every last drop of it. And I feel like if he was on board for a third movie, it would have just worn thin, and he would have done maybe like a Sam Raimi and Spider-Man 3 kind of thing. So yeah, overall, a lack of character emotion in this film, a lot of plot. I do appreciate the darker theme, but I wish they just leaned into it a bit more, like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Great moments in this movie, by the way. Just overall some great moments. Like the flying car, that's classic. The Whomping Willow, that's classic. Moaning Myrtle, great character. Another good casting in this movie. I talked about how the Harry Potter movies are famous for great casting. Kenneth Branagh as the teacher, the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, that's perfect casting. Like, he's so hammy in this movie, and he loves every second of it. I love Kenneth Branagh as an actor. He's a really good actor, I find. One moment I really like, by the way. I don't know why, I'm obsessed with the guy who plays, what do they call them? The Dudley or the Dursleys or whatever they're... The uncle? I think every time he's on screen, he fucking makes me laugh. He's got like his eyes and like kind of looking in the different directions and shit like that. And there's that part where he was like,
"You're never going back to that school. You're never gonna see those freaky friends of yours again." Freaky
friends! I liked how he said that. I know this is blasphemous. Even the character of Dobby I found was a little annoying, and it's just loud, and that's what I mean by loud characters. It's like all the characters are like way too eccentric, whereas in the first movie I felt like the characters were different personalities and they played off each other. Now when there's like a creature that's introduced, they're just loud, like the fucking elves, the pixies, the plants. It was kind of giving me a headache after a while, which I don't know, maybe it's just me becoming an old man. I remember when I used to watch SpongeBob as a kid, my dad would walk into the room and he'd be like, "Dude, just turn it off. This is way too loud for me." Maybe I'm just becoming that age where shit's too loud for me. Another perfect example of the darker tone in this movie would be the spiders. The fucking spider in this movie was terrifying to me as a kid. And the two kids, Ron and Harry, they wander into the forest, and the spider just says like, hey, I know you're a friend of Hagrid, but I gotta feed my kids. And they're like trying to eat Harry Potter, and you're like, holy, what the fuck, man? That's what I mean. I wish like the movie kept that darker tone more consistently throughout the movie. I feel like this movie does everything that the first movie did well, just to a slightly lesser extent, and the darker theme is the one thing that made this movie stand out from the first movie, and I wish it leaned more into that. That's my thoughts on Harry Potter 2. Less good than the first, but still a very enjoyable movie.
Can we panic now?